everybody. Welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm Dave Hooper, and I've got my good friend Howard Vincent here with me again today. Say hi, Howard.
Hi, Howard.
Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Good, man. How's the any interesting New Year's stories from either of you guys?
He had people that wouldn't leave till 3 in the morning, and I got drunk.
Hopefully none of them are listening right now.
And if you are, he had a great time with you guys.
Hey, he's not talking about you guys. He's talking about the other people.
I'm talking about the other people. You guys were fine.
Were
you know who I'm talking about.
And you were welcome anytime.
All right, so today we are going to tackle part 2 of a conversation we started last week along the lines of what, if anything, is in our skies, and if there is something up there, what is it, what's its purpose, and what might... let's see if we can find a little bit out about that. First of all, before we go any further, either of you guys have any reactions to last week's show? Anything that we talked about?
No. No.
Anything seem out of the ordinary? Or
No.
I mean,
no,
the topic in general.
I spent a little time looking a little deeper into some of the things you brought up that I didn't know about, which armed me a little bit for today. But no.
Because you had more than 2 hours notice on this one.
I had more than 2 hours notice.
Howard, aliens, 2 hours. Today it was 12 hours.
Yeah, today it was 12 hours.
It's getting a lot better. So once again, this is Down the Rabbit Hole, not down the conventional hole. So as always, have an open mind. And I will always say this. Do your own research. Don't listen to any one person, especially me. I don't want anyone to carry forward a mistake that might be in here. In fact, I misquoted a couple things. We'll correct those along the way. And every name and every institution and this is all information that is easily accessible on the largest library available in human history, called the Internet. It does more than play games and tell you about what Kim Kardashian's doing.
I mean, I can't play Bubble Crush anymore?
You can, I said, but it actually can do more than that.
I have no clue what that is.
Yeah, it can do the screaming goats thing on YouTube. Those are hilarious.
It's like buying a Ferrari and just parking it in your garage and listening to the radio. Like, it can do a lot more. So I'd like to recommend, this being a part 2 of this topic of, what might be in our skies. I recommend listening to the show from the 30th of December, which I guess now would be last year. So Happy New Year, everybody. And you can find that shows, all the shows here at Cave Radio, including Down the Rabbit Hole. Just go to caveradiobroadcasting.com. Then click on podcasts, scroll down to Down the Rabbit Hole, and you can see the shows that we've already done. So to recap last week, we had talked about just a litany of highly credible people that span our astronauts, pilots, air traffic controllers, all ranks of the military, Department of Defense officials, governors, presidents, even the Vatican. Thousands of individuals that have come out talking about the fact that there absolutely is something in our skies. Air traffic controllers have plotted something on thousands of occasions, not like once or twice. I think this probably happens once or twice a day at each air traffic tower. Nonetheless, you can't plot a hallucination. In addition to that, there are 24 nations that have officially come out and said there is something in our skies, including the United Nations. Howard made a good joke about the fact that may not be a government yet, but I suspect it's going to be our government, and believe me.
In that third term of the Obama presidency, it's all going to happen.
My friends keep asking me, who do you think is going to win the presidency? And they're arguing between Trump or Clinton or Bush, and I've been saying this for 4+ years, and I've got my reasons for saying this. Our next president, or I should say the president that will be in office come January of 2017. Now, it should be one of the names I just mentioned, but my prediction, I could be wrong. This is just for fun. I'm no prophet. My prediction is Obama will still be in office when that happens.
Well, if there's a way, he's the guy who's going to find it.
Well, he Did you guys see it all about the gun control measures he was
of course
putting through? I mean, that's starting to get close to a revolution, because if you talk to the people that understand.
Well, and the funny thing is that's one way he can remain in the White House is if there's a civil war.
Yeah. And I'm sure, not sure. Well, I am sure, actually. That is part of the plan. In fact, you've already got people talking about all these martial law signs they're seeing on the backs of trucks being distributed all over the United States. And like I said, all those FEMA camps have started heating up, and there's people now actually working in them. They aren't just dormant anymore. So things are happening fast, folks, and the information we're talking about, yeah, it might be interesting, but I'll also say this. This is information that could be extremely handy to have if and when that day ever comes. So to continue recapping last week, I made a mistake about calling that treaty that Eisenhower signed with our space brothers, or whatever you want to call it. I called it the Grenada Treaty. It was actually the Greada Treaty, no N. And I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's hard to know how to pronounce documents that aren't supposed to exist, yet do. So we had started off that show last week with 3 possibilities. And I personally went through all 3 of these stages myself, over the course of the last several years, which is for 42 years of my life. I really believed there was nothing strange in our skies. And it really wasn't even a question. It was just for me an assumed fact, because anything being up there was so far outside of my belief system that it was impossible. The old, I was dismissing it before even looking into it. The second possibility we looked into is, if there is something in our skies, which there seems to be, based on, again, the number of, we're talking about thousands of credible people. And if you don't have the patience to listen to the show from last week, go look up the Disclosure Project. You can YouTube it or Google it. There was a great presentation they did at the Washington Press Club a few years back. I actually think it's become an annual show, and you will see more stars, badges, and initials behind names than you would at an engineering convention. These are real people, ranging from admirals, 4-star generals, all the way down to privates and sergeants that are coming out and putting their reputations on the line, their families, even their marriages on the line by saying something like this. It's not an easy road, and these people don't have movie or book deals lined up. So to me, that lent a little credibility, or further credibility, that they really believe that there is something up there. So if you get past that first hurdle, that there may be something up there, it seems that once you're past that, there are 2 camps that dominate the landscape. One is that what is up there are actually, I think the new term we talked about last week were EBEs, or extraterrestrial biological entities, aliens. UFO is unidentified flying objects, so that's a very general term. We could certainly use that. So the people that, once you're past the first camp, the two schools of thought that remain are that these things are actually intelligent creatures from another place outside of Earth. Or there's another camp that believe that these are actually the demons from the Bible posing as our space brothers, as aliens. Both are. If you would have said either one of those 4 or 5 years ago, I would have eye-rolled you right out of the room, laughed you out of the room, probably made fun of you probably to your face. I would have.
And behind your back.
And maybe. I'm more of a confrontational. If I'm going to say something, it's going to be to you. But
I would have been calling people to mock the person who just said that after I mocked them to their face.
Now, the funny thing is after actually peeking behind that curtain, I came to realize that, we aren't the first people to discuss this, but the information in there literally could be soul saving. And I'm not trying to sound melodramatic, but when you kind of start to put this whole picture together, the what's in our skies, the entire planet's going to find this out relatively soon. And I think we've done enough to show that there absolutely is something up there. Certainly there are hoaxes. I'm not saying there aren't. And we're, on my personal level, I actually spent some time really believing that these things are intelligent creatures from another solar system, another galaxy, another who knows what. And as I kept looking further and further, I arrived at, what I've been calling that third camp, which is, in my opinion, most likely what we are literally looking at. And no matter what we're looking at, it's quote unquote, it's crazy. But what I believe we're looking at are most likely the very demons that we were warned about. We talked about that Newsweek article, and I'm going to refer constantly. It's every research group points these days that somewhere between 50 and 65% of the United States believes that there is something up there. So if you are actually walking around saying, no, there's nothing there, and you are crazy for even thinking or considering it, I'm going to tell you this. You're in the minority. And another thing
we're not purporting that any of these things are actual fact. What we're saying here is that there's just too many things that are being reported that you can completely dismiss it.
Yeah,
you can't deny that there's something going on. And if it was something that was much more believable than any of the hypotheses we've laid down for you, then why aren't they just saying that?
Exactly. Franklin Planner. Actually, I'm going to pull this out. I'm still one of those old school guys that has a paper Franklin Planner. I know that's like unheard of.
Do they even make filler for those anymore?
Do they even make paper anymore?
Yeah, what's paper?
And every day in the Franklin Planner, you get a little quote of the day. And I thought today's quote was sort of interesting because it really ties into the people that help keep what is up there hidden from us. And the quote, it comes from Harlan Cleveland, and it's this. If the validity of your action depends on its secrecy, it's better to decide to do something else.
Nice.
It might be all cool and fun to have a job where you have these secret oaths and top secret clearances, because certainly Hollywood glorifies those kinds of guys. And, one of my best friends from college is an FBI agent who married a federal prosecutor. Both of them have taken these oaths of, secrecy. They work for our government. And that's sort of, I understand about protecting secrets. At least, I get that. But when you start to find out how compartmentalized we are and how much each of us may literally unwittingly play a role in building a prison camp for our own humanity, you might want to reconsider. And I have a feeling that's what Harlan Cleveland was talking about in my Franklin Planner quote of the day.
It's excellent advice.
Yeah, easy to say, but who's going to quit based on, you can't just leave your income and we've all got debts and we're all on this treadmill, and it's easier said than done. So,
well, I found, working on our third supposition that if there is nothing above us, if there is actually something above us, and if it's not going to be an EBE, that if it's actually what has been called the demons from the Bible, I found what I thought was interesting in doing some research. I decided to dig back farther. Then we were talking about stuff. We really had no timeline on everything, but it seemed like a lot of the things we were talking about is stuff that happened around the time of Roswell and forward. So I'm like, everything's been so regulated, since the 40s, the mid 40s moving forward, post World War II, that what if we went back and looked at it like we've looked at other research and go back farther and you find this stuff was just popping up in papers all the time. It was just normal. People didn't think anything of it, and then it slowly disappeared, and then you didn't talk about it anymore. So I found an interesting article that in 776 AD in Sigeberg Castle in France, the Saxons had surrounded the French, and they were going to storm the castle. And the reason was they wanted to stop the Emperor Charlemagne from turning them into Christians. Okay. So
I'm not familiar with this story.
They're like, we want to remain pagan. We don't want you to enforce your Christianity upon us. And Charlemagne, well, obviously, he had an empire behind him. And Charlemagne's like, look, you're going to convert or die, which was the mantra of many confused early Christians. And so these Saxons have this castle in Sigeberg, France, surrounded. And all of a sudden, as they were getting ready to, I'm assuming, attack, all of a sudden, there appeared to be what they called giant flaming shields floating in the sky. They were burning red, orange, yellow, blue, and white light. And upon seeing these things, the Saxons took it as a sign from the gods, and they fell back and converted to Christianity.
Interesting. Very interesting. Actually, if you go back through history, and I just pulled up you can find these, these glowing orbs, these things that would look like modern day UFOs. There's one in a painting called The Madonna with Saint Giovannino. This was 15th century painting, and it's not alone. You can see this on the walls of the Egyptian pyramids, the hieroglyphs. The same with the Greeks. In fact, post flood, there were 270 documented cultures and or societies or peoples, all with a very similar story that spacemen from above, the star people, came down and, and across the planet, these starmen mingled with humans, and, as the story goes, which, I believe that was written in an ancient text somewhere that
I can't remember which one, but I think I remember reading a bit in the book you're talking about.
So, last week we were, and I want to remind everyone, this is a complicated and some emotional topic, and I highly recommend that we do not practice condemnation before investigation, because that really is what ignorance is.
Yeah, we're just trying to put it out there. We just want to talk about it. We're just trying to get you to not blindly accept what you're being fed. If it smells like dog poop, it must be dog poop. You know what I'm saying?
Usually, yeah. I used to think ignorance was stupidity, but all ignorance is
bliss. I mean, I was definitely living a more carefree life when I was ignorant.
Well, ignorance,
that's for sure.
Ignorance is bliss. What I was getting at was ignorance is just ignoring. It's dismissing something before looking at it. And once again, the little instruction manual for humanity, which some people call the Bible, was very clear that, if you're ignorant to the stuff going on around you, it is not going to help you when you need it.
Nope.
So,
I found one. I got to share this because I found this other one very interesting. I have a bunch of things, but this one I also found very, very interesting because it pertains to World War II. So one of the first recorded that you can actually go back and get hard documentation on, one of the first major cases that happened in the United States happened in New Mexico on March 26 in 1880. There was the skies above a small town called Galisteo Junction in New Mexico They saw some lights, they heard voices, which seemed to be coming from the sky above, and when people looked up, they saw a circular ship, monstrous in size, and its movements were described as approaching rapidly and then slowly to an elegant waltz across the sky. It said that the occupants of the ships were human, but their clothing and behavior were bizarre. The occupants were spoken to. When they were spoken to, they claimed to be from Mars. They left a few things behind, a few artifacts, a cup, a flower wrapped in silk. And the very next day, there was a gentleman who had heard about the episode, and he showed up, and he identified himself as a collector of curiosities. And he talked to the station owner who had these artifacts or had possession or knew who had possession of these artifacts, and he offered a sum of money that was so ridiculous that they just couldn't pass it up. And so they gave him these artifacts, which he claimed were Asiatic in origin.
Asiatic?
Asiatic.
Meaning?
Asian.
Ah, okay.
I mean, I'm using 1880 English because that I'm using what's in quotes, but
okay.
But that I would assume are Asian in origin, and then promptly disappeared, and he and the artifacts were never heard from again. Now, what I find interesting about this is not only that story and the fact that it's recorded back in 1880, is that the town Galisteo Junction, New Mexico. Does that sound familiar to you?
It does.
Well, because modern day Galisteo Junction, New Mexico,
don't even say it
is known as Lammy.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thought you were going to say Roswell.
No,
that's the
but it's
neighboring
close.
town.
But do you know why Lammy is so significant?
Tell me.
Because that was the train depot that Oppenheimer used to get to the proving grounds where they created the nuclear weapons.
Interesting.
Or I'm sorry, the H-bombs, the atom bombs.
Interesting.
Now, you have in that area unidentified materials being collected by a collector. And then just 60 years later, Oppenheimer and his group are brought to the same town and magically are able to create atomic and hydrogen bombs. And correct me if I'm saying the wrong type of bombs, but when I saw that link, as I was digging through this and clicking the links and doing the research, I'm like, yeah, that's not weird.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, our government began, in fact, maybe you can look this up, Manhattan Project, but I know it was in full gear by 1942. It had 150,000 employees. I mean, this is a massive operation. And what they did, instead of using existing facilities, they actually went out to the desert to build a town to seclude these people from the rest of the world. And as a businessman, that never really made much sense. Perhaps the secrecy involved is why they did it. But then again, the secrecy was between the individual people, the 150,000 employees of essentially this Manhattan Project. And if they already weren't talking to each other, so what if they would have been, in the public domain? It would have made no difference.
Yeah, the Manhattan Project actually started out as a project with the Army called the Manhattan District. And it was put together with a much smaller group prior to 1942. But the second the Japanese invaded Pearl Harbor, attacked Pearl Harbor, FDR called up the general who was running the place and said, whatever you need. We need this to happen. And that's when they kicked it into high gear, moved it to the desert, and it became the Manhattan Project.
Interesting. All right. So last week when we left off, we were talking about some other, interesting turns. We talked about William Colby, the former director of the CIA, who had reached out to Stephen Greer of the Disclosure Project and wanted to give him some funding and some actual pieces of recovered advanced technology. And the week that meeting was supposed to happen, Colby turned up dead. He was floating in the Potomac after going on a routine canoe trip, which he did all the time. And then we had also talked about the the 20 astronomers that were killed in the French Alps. This was in 1999 on their way to make some sort of announcement that would literally change the world. And again, some freak cable car accident happens, and they never made it to the podium. And, when that happens once, okay. But here again, I don't like coincidences, like any investigator. We don't know what they were going to say, but the fact that these freak accidents seem to surround secrecy of certain topics like this kind of tells me that those people were on the right track.
Or at least getting too close to the right track.
Right. Or it wasn't time yet for the quote-unquote big reveal, which I suspect is coming relatively soon. So anything else you wanted to bring up before I was going to go through a little timeline, and you've actually added to my timeline of, I guess, important dates in the history of what
I was just surprised that as I was doing my research that this went back so much farther than that. We all know about cave drawings and stuff like that, but I mean, there's literally stuff that goes all the way back with that they're showing, and it's obviously UFOs. I mean, it's obviously something hovering above them. It's not just a light or something like that.
Yeah, they didn't have weather balloons back
no,
then.
No.
Balloons perhaps, but let's be not reflective.
No, but there's cave drawings, and there's no way it's not a flying saucer. Do
you guys ever wonder why you can put on any mainstream media show network and you have 1,000 times more likelihood of watching yet another diet program instead of one of them digging into this topic more deeply? Does that seem strange to anybody, that we're kind of fed like the same gobbledygook over and over and over, and some of the most fascinating things in history, even if to dismiss it, they're never even entertained? Does that mean anything to you guys, or do you think do we really want another diet show or another how to manage your money show? Do you know what I mean?
I gotcha, man. Again, I think they're just spoon feeding the sheep what they need to, what they think they need to hear.
All right, so a few important dates that I wanted to discuss. Now, you mentioned one. I'm going to go back a little bit further than you. I'm not trying to one-up you, and I'm going to want you to give me the year you had yours again. But approximately in 90 A.D., and this is when certain books of the New Testament were being written. This was, I'm guessing it was a letter to the Thessalonians, so this probably would have been Paul. He wrote, it's 2 Thessalonians 2, and this is chapter 3 and chapters 9 to 12. And he has a warning for humanity. It says, "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and that the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition." Now that is one of the many names given to Satan in the Bible. Later on in that same book, 2 Thessalonians, chapter 9, it's another warning is given. The coming of the lawless one. Again, this is another moniker for the devil or Satan. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan. The lawless one would be the Antichrist, excuse me. The coming of the lawless one is according to the work of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with unrighteous deception among those who perish. And when they say perish, they're talking about the second death, like the death of your soul. This is for the people that ignore this and don't get what is really going on, if these are demons. You're going to end up being fooled by what they have up their sleeve, and you're not going to pass this test. And this was a very clear warning in 90 AD that was made. let me continue. And with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason, God will send them a strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So I think that's God's way of saying, and we've got a lot of misconceptions about what he said. I certainly did until I actually started studying what he said. But I'll say this. He does not think very highly of ignorant people. And here again, I'm going to use the example of I've been a CEO of several corporations ranging from employee sizes of several hundred with multiple locations to a staff of just a few people. And in all of those places, I can tell you, when you're running something that's of value and there are other people that had to earn their way in, you are protective of the front gates of who you let in. In the same metaphor I used, I might put an ad on monster.com to the whole world saying, hey, anyone can get a job here. Here's how you do it. Get an education in engineering or get an education in writing or in any of these areas. Be respectful and, you've got a home here. But I'm not going to be interested in and I've had them happen, guys that show up to an interview. They know nothing about my business. They have done no homework on they're ignorant. They just ignored my own suggestions, expecting that they're going to just get a job because I need to hire 20 people within a month. And when I hear people talking about, and I used to be this way too, like if heaven and hell are real, I just assumed that, well, it is my prerogative and right to go to heaven. And that's sort of the impression that I've gotten through a lifetime of mainstream media. But I've come to realize that I think there's a few more hoops to jump. There's certainly some shortcuts that Jesus gave us by dying on the cross, and if you invoke his name, but you have to really believe. And I don't want to get too far off topics tonight because we are talking about a real conspiracy, the what's in our skies. And although I dedicated last week's show to Is Uncle Mike listening? Do you know? Did he listen last week? Or
I don't know. I haven't talked to him. I'm not
Uncle Mike follower.
Yeah, no. So, but I know he has tuned in, and I'm trying to see if there's no one in the chat room right now. Occupied Justice was there a minute ago, but they're gone now. But no, I mean you can dedicate it to him.
All right. So from the Old Testament, there is, and throughout the beginning of the history of man, there has been some sort of belief or understanding or depiction of star people. And I had this interesting conversation. I won't mention her name, but she's someone that I met who is a supporter of the 9/11 Truth Movement. And we had a full-blown conversation on, basically I was able to speak about everything I didn't have to hold back a single word about any of the incredible things that we've discovered. And I found it ironic because she understood the entire story, this entire this coordinated conspiracy, but for some reason, she just simply has chosen to believe that whatever's in our skies is truly, they're aliens and they're benevolent. And, I think I'm in the other school, which is I don't really think they're aliens and I don't think they're benevolent at all.
I think they would have you believe that they're benevolent.
I know you don't like me using the word Hegelian dialectic, but I'm going to throw it out today because it was...
Check it off.
Yeah, check it off. Because if they use the same MO that they use for everything else, and I'm talking about, these are the evil powers behind our currency, behind our banking. Again, the Bible refers to these guys as the synagogue of Satan. They're not really Jewish people. They're like quasi Zionists posing as Jews, but they're really Luciferians. I mean, they really are Satanists in this world, and they're hyper powerful people. Where was I going without a Hegelian dialectic? You tie that into the fact that you've got NASA insiders and defectors. I mean, these guys are coming out in droves. Just YouTube NASA defectors and aliens. Just those three keywords. And there will be so much. These are, again, credible people putting a lot on the line, maybe even their life. And the consensus among these guys, I'm going to synthesize what, by and large, their story is, and that there are literally 17 different types of quote unquote alien creatures that they have identified. There are the Greys, there are reptilians, they're supposedly bad. There are the Nordic Whites or the Pleiadians. So if they're going to keep using the old Hegelian dialectic on us, what they're going to do is, now we have to understand, they're all bad. It's sort of like our politicians. They're all bad. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican.
Yeah, they equally suck.
You're going to get the same war policy, same economic policy, same gun policy, same erosion of freedoms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you've got most of humanity tangled up in some argument over politics, when actually they're just arguing about whose personality they like the most. And it's kind of sad to see people bounced around like a little ping pong ball like that. But that is the sheep mentality of our race. Where the hell was I going with that? This is what happens when you have to drive 100 miles to get to this thing on time. 100 miles an hour. Luciferians. Thanks, Howard.
Sorry, man.
All right, doesn't matter. So there have been a lot of events that Hegelian dialectic, which I was getting to, is if they're going to use their old modus operandi, the old MO of doing things, they're going to they're going to present some of these literally documented 17 different races. Some of those are going to be the quote-unquote bad guy aliens. And then we're going to have the good guy aliens come in, and somehow Earth is going to get sucked up into this, supposedly intergalactic war. And the quote-unquote good aliens are going to win. And as part of, this again was a warning in the book of Revelation. When the good aliens win, we're going to feel as humans real good, real relieved. Thank God for this terror to end, because, as the Bible also said, men's hearts will be failing them for what they see.
They've been easing us into that for years in the movies, always the guy that's attacking the planet is always part of the bad alien race who hates the humans and is jealous of the humans. And then the good alien comes in and everything's all good. We're all going to be just fine now. The good alien guys.
If people only realized the power of Hollywood and how it shapes how we think our country works. It shapes how we think intelligence agencies work. But I can tell you one thing, after actually looking and being in it, it all it does is shapes our imagination of how it does not.
Well, right. And I mean, the more you see this kind of stuff, the less you become desensitized to it. So when it happens, you're going to be like, oh yeah, we saw this before.
Exactly. And we've already been pre-programmed to root for the hero that's, it's almost like Superman versus General Zod.
There you go.
Both of them are quote-unquote aliens. They are. They were born on Krypton. And there's a war that occurs on Earth. And you'll see this biblical theme in almost every space movie possible. And the good alien, Superman, wins it for the world. Now, if you're looking at the Bible story, Superman would actually be the Antichrist. He is going to be loved by everyone. And imagine some being, I don't know if it's someone that's completely human or who knows what they're going to present this person as, but there is going to be a living being that is going to rise up that many people believe is right now waiting in the wings as we speak in this world, about to present himself. This staged alien war happens. This guy becomes the face of peace and bringing harmony, and then the false prophet steps up, which I personally believe is going to be coming out of the Vatican. But that, who knows, that may or may not. Doesn't mean Catholics are bad. My mom's a Catholic. I love her. It just means their leadership is corrupted in the hands of the devil.
There's been a lot of interesting things that come out of the Vatican as well. So,
well, the Vatican, ironically, has the most powerful telescope on the planet. And the name of that telescope is Lucifer. Go Google that one, folks. And the Pope's already starting to say things like, if and when aliens do manifest themselves and appear, we should accept them as our brothers. We should be able to baptize them. He is already setting up 1 billion Catholics.
Can they enter the priesthood?
They're probably already in it. Anyhow, so the big, huge warning in the Bible, it's the number one warning, the most important one, which is basically don't get deceived by this thing. This thing is very real. It is going to happen. And when this Antichrist dude pops up to bring peace, we are going to be invited to join some, I don't know, federation of planets or whatever you want to call it. Who gives a shit? It's not even, it's all bullshit. And the entrance requirement is going to be for us to take a mark of some sort. And again, whether that's a tattoo, an injection, we talked a little bit about RFID chips. It seems that whatever this thing is going to manipulate and change our DNA. And we are all going to be faced with a very, very tough choice. And I do believe this is happening in our lifetime. And I'm not like for our grandchildren to worry about. This is for us to worry about. And I think this is where those cryptic quotes about you're going to need some strong faith to get through this, because I never really got that. Because, most people believe in God in some way, shape, or another. But the specific warning was this. Those folks that accept this mark, they're lost forever. And it's also said in there that at that time, you're going to be offered essentially this choice. Accept this mark, have it, whatever, injected or put into you. And there's already people volunteering to do this, by the way. This is not like some sci-fi Orwellian futuristic story. This is happening.
People are taking the mark to pay for copies in like Copenhagen or something like that.
Yeah, that's proliferating a lot faster than we realize, and it's going to be all over the planet very, very soon. But it's not like it's going to be such an easy decision where you can just decide to say, oh, no thanks, I don't want it, because not only will you not be able to buy or sell, you will totally be excommunicated from society if you do not accept this mark. But there's actually a much bigger incentive, and that is, and this is going to sound a little bit morbid, and I'm sorry, I'm just a messenger here. I'm not the planner of this thing. The other option you're going to have is to allow yourself to be beheaded. Now that scares the living shit out of me, because for a long time I wasn't sure if that moment came, and if you believe the predictions that are in the Bible, literally we're going to be in a line of people, and there's going to be blood rolling down the hallways, and you're going to be put in a chair and said, we are going to be asked, do you accept this Antichrist guy as essentially the God, your God, or if not, and they're also going to ask us to renounce Jesus, why they're going to do that. Think about it. If he's not our Savior, then why would they bother having you renounce that? This information may come in handy if you ever find yourself in one of those lines, by the way. So
I thought I was one of the at the Secretary of State's office the other day.
Yeah, that's sort of like training. And believe me, man, I've actually tried to imagine what's it going to be like when, and I know this sounds really morbid, but there's a pile of heads in the corner. Those people that chose not to take. And you can either have that happen to you, or a very nice person can be saying, "Dude, why do that? Why why let yourself go? You can get this thing injected and go home. Go see your kids. Go see your family. We'll put $50,000 on your chip. Don't you want to join the new world?" And the vast majority of humanity they're just going to make the wrong decision. They're going to lose their souls. And the way God set it up is we have until our last dying breath to essentially claim invoke him. But God's got a problem near the end, because there's going to be a judgment on the entire planet. And the judgment's going to come before all of humanity's dead. So there was an interesting theologian, I don't even remember his name, but he had surmised, and this sounded right to me, that basically everything that Satan's doing, God's a step ahead of him, and he's just using him like a toy. And at the end of the day, God is the master puppeteer. But this is one way. This warning and this very clear moment, which is yet to come in our future, this will be God's way of essentially short-circuiting any individual human making that decision before they're dead. And he was very clear about it. He said, the last generation, he also said when it would happen. He said this would all happen within one generation of the reestablishment of Israel, which in itself was an impossible prediction made 2,000 years ago. Now, Israel was reformed in 1948. You add 70 years to that, we're looking at 2018. So when you look at Bible prophecy, and it's too bad that so many people have bought into the mainstream lie, which is literally Satan's lie of dismissing the Bible before looking into it. And you know what? I almost did. For 42 years, I thought
I did for a very long time.
I thought the book was a bunch of ridiculous, effing, stupid myths until I actually started studying it, and it was a jaw dropper. The mathematics behind that book, not just the two-dimensional reading of the words. You could literally fold that book into a 3D cube of information, and you can read it from any direction. We're only reading it superficially. This thing was not written by humans, and how sad for so many people that maybe even turned off this broadcast because the word Bible was brought up. I have enough faith now in that book to know that we will be presented with this decision. And now I understand is your faith strong enough? Yeah, we all, when we're at a party and drinking or at church on Sunday, everyone, quote unquote, believes in Jesus. But do you believe enough to lose your head over him? And that is going to be our test. And that is in our future. And scary stuff, without a doubt. Let's let that sink in. I think, Eric, we're going to take a break. Is everyone all freaked out enough here? I'm freaked out. I'm going to have a cigarette, take the edge off. We'll be back in a few minutes. This is Down the Rabbit Hole with Dave Hooper and Howard Vincent. We are back to Down the Rabbit Hole. And I love that you've got Rage Against the Machine.
Oh, man, I love it.
We never even talked about it, but that is a band that I think, is somewhere between partially to fully aware of the very thing we're talking about. And the machine they're talking about are essentially is the system of power in our country. And they literally wanted us to rage against it because they were, there's
one of my favorite bands.
They've become one of my favorite. They were hard to listen to early on, but I have fallen in love with them because it's woven into almost all of their songs, this theme of wake up, people, wake up. What is happening to you? You're missing it. And we just keep just mindlessly moving along, not thinking a darn thing about the bigger picture, just kind of living in that ignorance is bliss mode. So Howard had to step out. He's got some family obligations, and he's probably going to be joining us on a regular basis for the first hour of this show going forward.
Very cool.
And he also gave me a very good piece of advice, and that's not for me not to get too preachy here. Sometimes I do get excited because,
well, like I said in the first episode, I think we both agree that you did go a little to the preachy side or whatever, and we talked about it. And I think you've had a good handle on having both of them. The conspiracy side with the truth on one side, and then you weave it into the Bible or weave it into your preachy or whatever just perfectly, I think. I think it's perfect, man.
Well, look, I am no preacher.
No.
And once again, I wasn't, believe me, discovering that what's written in the Bible, it might actually be true, that kind of fucked up my life because my life was about booze, partying, women, good times, and man, there's a part of me that does miss that. Don't get me wrong, but
well, you said you're not a preacher. We actually do have a preacher that's starting a show on Cave Radio.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Frank Turner.
Oh, is he going to be?
No, it's gonna be a little bit of everything. I think on his opening, it's a little bit of whatever it is. It's going to be a little preachy, not too bad, but it's going to be spiritual. But it's going to lean towards helping the community out and talking about the community and helping people out, self-help type stuff. And it's going to be pretty cool. But Frank Turner, formerly of Channel 7 News, Emmy Award-winning Frank Turner, is joining the Cave Radio ranks from 2 to 4 p.m. every Monday through Friday.
Yeah, well, I met him last week.
Yes,
we had a beer over at our neighbor Mick Knows. And good guy. So he's been touched by God in some way.
Well, he had some troubles when he was on the air in Detroit, with drugs and alcohol. And he found the Lord. He left Channel 7 News and retired comfortably and started a ministry. Well, once he got into ministry, he started, getting calls from people who were trying to ban their daughters from marrying another woman, and they weren't going to go to their wedding because their daughters were gay and their sons were gay and stuff. And he was like, well, they're still your son and your daughter. You got to go to the wedding. And he started talking about that, and some of the powers that be that were funding his ministry said, we don't believe in the same things you do, so we're going to pull your funding. So he kind of had to step away from that or whatever, but he's doing something. I guess he's got some church in Novi or Northville, and, he's going to bring some of that in, but he's going to be Frank Turner like he was when he was here, motivational speaker. Hold on. Ellen Byrne just posted what he does. Motivational speaker in the Believers Church in Novi.
Gotcha.
Is the name. But Ellen is listening, so is Tony. Actually, you have listeners all over the place. You got people tuning in from all over Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Delaware. There's always, when your show, Tony's show, and the one of the other shows here, there's always someone listening from like the Maryland, Virginia area.
There's always someone listening.
We got Florida, Kansas, Colorado, Hawaii, Texas, and California all tuned in. So thank you guys for listening to Down the Rabbit Hole.
All right. Well, I will try not to let you guys down. I will try to present this as openly as possible. And I want everyone to understand something. My intention is not to scare people. And my intention also is not to turn you into some Bible believer, but simply present some information that you may decide is important to you, information we just don't get from our mainstream media. And it was when I started looking behind the scenes, and the first walnut I cracked was the 9/11, which, if you've seen my movie, it's pretty laughable, the story that they tried to present to us. So I kind of believe in there's a quote, and it's from Ephesians 5:11, which it was in the movie too. It was along the lines of, better to uncover the unfruitful deeds of evil than participate in them. So everyone's got a different calling. Some people heal people. Some people preach. Some people do what Frank does. I mean, help you get through tough times. Believe me, I wish. I guess I wish I was still able to party without it screwing up my soul. But once in, I wish there were other. Believe me, this is not fun. This is not fun. It's interesting. I will say that it's actually fascinating, but it's also scary. But you know what? The truth is, if you're a watchman and you're on a watchtower somewhere, and it's your job to alert the townsmen of an approaching army, you need to do your job. And even if the people in the little village don't want to hear about it, the fact is, if there is an army surrounding your village, eventually they're going to need to know it. And the more prepared they are, the better off everyone will be. So we started going through some historical events that are in the category of under the umbrella of these extra worldly visitations, or the plans for them. So, I'd been doing some research, and I did find in the United States, modern day, the idea for staging an alien invasion actually had its origins, believe it or not, as early as 1917. So this was attributed to, I want to say his name is John Dewey, a Columbia University professor, and I could be screwing that up completely. He was a Jesuit professor, and the Jesuits, and I'm not a Jesuit expert, but I believe they've embodied the same elements of many of the secret societies. And I want to clarify something. The vast, vast majority of people inside of secret societies, like the Freemasons, for example, they are not aware of the bigger picture. It's not until you're very deep in these secret societies that they're actually used as in a sense, a recruiting tool. The Jesuits seem to be more focused on infiltrating the Vatican. Nonetheless, I don't find it surprising that in 1917, this was a quote, and I believe this is a quote from, I'm going to look for the name here in a second, but 1917, someone remarked that the best way to unite all the nations on this globe would be an attack from some other planet. In the face of such an alien army, people will respond with a sense of their unity of interest and purpose. So this plan was, like all the unfruitful deeds of darkness, was leaked. This one I don't think was an accident, though. These are people with a conscience that had the guts to come out and say something about it. And so there we are. We're off and running. 1917 is the beginnings of this plan to stage this alien invasion, potential alien invasion. 1919. At this point, Germany has lost World War I. The country is utterly devastated. They were forced to sign the Versailles Treaty, which basically would keep them impoverished for a generation or two. It was, I'm sure we've all at some point, there were food lines. The inflation was increasing at such a high rate. You could get in a line for bread with your entire life savings. And by the time you got to the front of the line, the price of bread had skyrocketed so much you couldn't even afford that loaf of bread anymore. That's where Germany was in 1919, a decimated nation. In 1920, the Nazi Party was established. And I've already talked about on several other shows the hidden religion of the Nazi Party was the occult. It was the dark magic. It was the summoning up of spirits, what we might today call everything from, the ascended masters. And I was a big Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters believer for most of my life, frankly, because it just made sense. Have since come to believe that, and I was pissed when I heard this. So if you're pissed, I understand, believe me, because it fit my little worldview. And I'm like, okay, we're going to get many lives and we keep being sent down here for redos. But I suspect now that I've looked into it that may be more of part of this hoax. Nonetheless, Nazis, 1920, devastated nation. Nazi Party rises to power with access to lots of stuff, including advanced technology and weapons and an unending supply of money. And here again, I think we've linked the printers of money to literally demonic forces. And we've also talked about, the occult is really it's a veiled worship of, the demonic gods of our world. The same ones that we've again, the veiled worship is what's been going on in, let's just say, the last 1,000 or so years. But when you look at, for instance, what are the programs that came out of NASA? It was Mercury, Apollo, Gemini. These are all the same gods that, they all originated in Babylon. They just have changed their names over time, but they are still completely in our vernacular. And I think these are more than just, token titles. By 1935, Nazi Germany, they've now tapped into a wealth of wealth. And in 15 short years, 1920 Nazi Party comes to life. By 1935, they're already in a position to begin world domination. Chamberlain, for the Prime Minister Chamberlain of England, was aware and was fearful of this. FDR, by now, was trying to get the United States armed and prepared for World War II. And this country in 15 years went from nothing to a superpower. It'd be the equivalent of, let's pick some third world country that is utterly decimated. Let's say Botswana or Kenya or Ghana, and predicting that in 15 years they'd be on the brink of world domination. It's any nation that goes through that sort of rapid growth, I think, is getting some assistance from the outside. It's not an organic growth. It's not genuine. As we all know, World War II would end up starting in 1939, and year before that was the famous Orson Welles broadcast. It was on radio only, where he was reading as a news report about George Orwell's, what was his book? War of the Worlds. And this was a story my dad told me from his youth, because he listened to it with my grandparents. And there were Americans that were committing suicide just by the potential fear that, because they thought what he was saying was actually happening. I've come to view that now as a quick, like a run-up, a practice run, which seems to be also a common theme. And not surprised to find out that Orson Welles, like so many of these other guys, was a member of one of these free societies, and apparently a 33rd degree plus Mason. So Nazis invade Poland, 1939. I believe it was September 1st. World War II begins in earnest. We've all seen the red map with the swastika, and it grows until 1942. And then the Nazis get turned back at Stalingrad. They got very close to Moscow. In fact, they could see, I think they got within 12 or 13 miles of Moscow before they were turned back as well. They lost a few very important military divisions, and from 1942 on, the Germans were retreating. Yet, it was in 1942 that the final solution was agreed upon. The final solution was the answer to what they called the Jewish question. And I always found this odd. A country that is in retreat, reeling militarily, decides to devote mass amount of resources to accelerating the extermination of the Jews. Not just the Jews, there were many, many millions killed beyond just Jewish people, but I think their attendance in these death camps was very important. And if the Jews had been completely wiped out, as I believe Hitler, not by his own idea, but by his controllers' idea, you get them all wiped out, there's no remnant left with which to reestablish Israel, which is one of the most incredible prophecies written in a book 2,000 years ago. To predict that this nation would come back together and adopt its old language and its old currency and 100 other predictions around it, all of them, believe me, I have spent time trying to disprove it, and I wish I could, because it would take one hell of a big burden off my life. But I haven't. So I think the fallback plan, I think obviously the full extermination of the future inhabitants of Israel did not happen. And I think the forces of evil were probably aware that was going to be the case, because as I had mentioned before, that the three-war plan, which was made public a little bit after 1871, in that famous letter between Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini, where the writer was struck by lightning. I think the three world wars were already planned, and as we all know, we're on the precipice of the third. The fact that massive resources would have been devoted to the death camps instead of to the military front lines might be considered a clue that there was a demonic influence in the decision-making. But again, I will let you guys do your own research on that and come up with your own answers. So, all right, we're in the 1940s. 1942, the Battle of Los Angeles. And I'm not talking about the Aaron Eckhart movie. I'm talking about a ship that was photographed by hundreds of people, spotlights, shot at like crazy by the military. Most people thought this was an invasion by the Japanese. As it turned out, it wasn't. The wreckage of this thing was, as always, cordoned off by the military, and it became a hush-hush topic, even to this day. A lot of people aren't even aware of the Battle of Los Angeles, but go look up some of the pictures. I think you'll find it fascinating, that even the possibility of it. 1947, Admiral Byrd, deathbed memoirs. He was part of an operation. He led a naval battle fleet to the Antarctic. He was very sheepish about what he found there. All he was able to say cryptically was that we've got to get our military there. We've got to arm ourselves. We've got to get a presence in Antarctica. This is about national security. So I think it was more than just finding natural resources. To this day, we have a military presence. Several nations have a military presence in Antarctica with somehow we were able to fight wars against each other, but we all agree, the leaders of Russia and China and the United States, etc., all agree to jointly protect Antarctica from being explored by civilians. So if we have time, we'll get back to some of what Admiral Byrd said, because like with so many of these people, when you start to face death a little more closely and you realize you're in your later years and things like the oaths you took and the secrecy and the lies you've covered up, you start to realize that there are more important things in this world than keeping secrets. It's very often near someone's last moments when they come out and start to really speak some of the things that really happened. I will let you guys for now look into Admiral Byrd. This is someone that was as famous in the 1940s and 50s as General Norman Schwarzkopf was to my generation in the early 90s. He's not some, fly-by-night, low-level general. This guy was the real deal, world famous. 1947, FBI starts to investigate these supernatural occurrences. They start documenting it. Now, they weren't documenting Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, all right? Yet those are also, quote-unquote, supposedly myths. Another thing I'll mention about cognitive dissonance, if I go to a party and say I believe in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, no one's going to be scared. People might snicker and laugh or think I'm joking, but no one's going to be angry with me. No one's going to be upset. I suspect, because I certainly went through this, that a lot of people listening tonight might be angry or upset. Once again, I want to remind you, don't shoot the messenger, but think of it like this. If that does describe what you're feeling right now, I suspect what you're battling cognitive dissonance, which means there is a part of you that secretly or deep down considers the topics we're discussing to be possible. And it is frightening if it's real. It is. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but if this is real, then this is information that every human needs to have, should that day, heaven forbid, should that day come. And if you do find yourself pissed off at this show or at me or at any of the guys that are on with us, take a second look and ask yourself why. Maybe look into it further. Because if I was up here trying to tell you Santa Claus is real or something else ridiculous like all wax figures are going to come to life and try to take over the world, those things are laughable. And I could be laughed out of a room and that'd be fine. But when you find yourself getting angry, that might be a little inner voice that's trying to tell you, wake up to this. The same thing that my buddies at Rage Against the Machine were trying to do. 1948, Israel was established, fulfills probably the most amazing prophetic, the most amazing prediction from an ancient text. And there are so many. That's one of the ways that this assembly of books called the Bible authenticates itself. Nothing has a 100% accuracy when it comes to predicting the future. Nostradamus hit on about 80%. Edgar Cayce, about 80%. And that sounds about right to me because these are people that I am guessing were in touch with the spirit world. A lot of people know the spirit world is real. They just might not understand who the good guys and who the bad guys are. And if there is a spirit world, they certainly have read prophecy. They know what's coming, and they could probably predict a lot of stuff and look really accurate and amazing. And they can probably predict it with a good amount of accuracy. But they won't be 100% accurate. That's one of the markers that God discusses. He's like, if you're a real prophet of God, you will not have a single mistake. You essentially will be perfect. And you can see that group defines itself, or is self-defined by their own success rate in predicting some of these things. All right. Israel and aliens. I don't see the connection yet. Bear with me. 1952, from July 19th to July 26th, there were UFOs over the Capitol, over Washington, D.C. This lasted for almost a week. This is a well-established fact. This is not some conspiracy theory. If you're not believing facts, then, well, you got bigger problems. You got bigger problems than we're ever going to solve on this show. Airports were closed around D.C. Fighters were scrambled. This was all over the headlines. There was absolutely something there. This might have been the quote-unquote first phase of the unveiling, at least to the folks that are in power in multiple nations in this world. And that led to Dwight D. Eisenhower's signing of the Greanda Treaty in 1954. That would have been February 21st of 1954. Several of his cabinet members and chiefs of staff that were with him, also again sworn to secrecy, and also again in their later lives, would come out in an uncoordinated fashion discussing the fact that, holy crap, holy cow, we really did cut this deal. This is real. These guys are really here. And I'm sorry I kept it quiet. And I'll let, this is what, it's almost like your conscience begins to speak to you and maybe gets the better of some of these guys. So that treaty, as history has it, 1954. 1955. General Douglas MacArthur, another famous general. I'm sure we've all heard of him. He was giving this speech at West Point to the graduating class, and here's his quote. He said, "The next war will be an interplanetary war. The nations of the Earth must someday make a common front against attack by people from other planets." Now, MacArthur and Admiral Byrd were in touch with each other. They shared their experiences. That either General MacArthur is one of the best. It seems to me that he had some sort of inside information. Let's just say that. All right, so the 50s, 60s happen. Majestic 12, Project Blue Book, Project Blue Beam. And many of these are actual government commissions set up to ultimately officially come out and say, there's nothing to any of these stories. There are no aliens. There are no nothing. I'll say one thing about every time the government sets up a commission to tell us that Lee Harvey Oswald shot Kennedy, or that 19 guys from Afghanistan knocked down 3 buildings with 2 airplanes, i.e., I find more often than not, government commissions are set up to seal us from the truth, not to enlighten us. But you know what? You'd actually have to take the time to read something like the 9/11 Commission report, which I did. And anyone that knows about my film, the main character in my movie was World Trade Center Building 7.
Building 7.
Which wasn't even mentioned in the 9/11 Commission report. So go chew on that one for a while. 1985, Ronald Reagan. Now, last week I quoted Reagan, something he'd said while on Air Force One, asking the pilot to chase this white globe, wondering what it was. 1985, he says this. When you stop to think that we're all God's children, wherever we may live in this world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on Earth together. Now, when you understand how presidents make speeches, they're typically not written by the president. They're written by people that he appointed or was asked to appoint by the powers that be. I have personal opinion that it's speeches like that, speeches like MacArthur's, speeches like Eisenhower's of warning us against the military-industrial complex, which is a catch-all phrase for the powers that be that are in control of this very advanced technology that was put into our hands. Again, I don't believe it was from creatures from another planet. I did for a while. I do believe that they're actually from right here on Earth, and it's just old technology just dusted off and reintroduced to humanity, and we're all oohing and eyeing what's already been done. In fact, there's a book somewhere that says there is nothing new under the sun. I've referenced the book enough. I think you know who I'm talking about. 1991, Henry Kissinger. Again, these men that circle the president. He had an interesting quote, and it was this. He said, "Today, America would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead to deliver them from this evil. The one thing that man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by the world government." That's in 1991 and perfectly in line. I think most of us that have done research into these powers behind currency, these occultic powers are very familiar with the fact that he was an absolute diehard member of them, and perhaps giving us hints as to what the plan is going to be to unite the world. This one world government, which was first warned against, again, in the book of Revelation, that Satan would somehow get the whole world to praise him and the Antichrist. You can start to see these pieces falling in place together, and then you combine that with the fact that, other specific predictions about people losing their heads, literally having them chopped off. Then you go cross-reference the fact that the same way there were death camps built in Nazi Germany and the intelligentsia of that country were speaking about them, but they couldn't get the public to believe it. Yet they were already built and they were already operating. And now history has told us that they were absolutely true. I see it repeating here in the United States almost verbatim. And we are so, sometimes as a species, we're pretty dumb because it's our... we even warned against the fact that if you don't study history, you're going to repeat it, and it's repeating itself. Anyone with half a brain... Now, let me rephrase that because I'm sounding like a dick, and I don't mean to. Anyone that takes the time to research this will reach the conclusion beyond any benefit, beyond any doubt, that there are approximately 500 to 800 what are called FEMA camps built. And when you look at them, you'll see they are designed to keep people in. They are not, I don't care what Homeland Security says they're for. These places just give me the heebie-jeebies. A lot of military folks and innocent, good Homeland Security employees. Go look them up on YouTube. They're coming out and simply asking a question of, Why are there guillotines being stacked and being kept at all of these? Why is the government putting in purchase orders, which you can go view online, for 100,000 guillotines? You guys put this together so you can see it's almost like a chess game. We don't even know how to play chess, but we're only one or two moves away from a checkmate if this is the strategy of those that truly rule the planet. We are much closer than most would believe. So Kissinger makes that what I consider astonishing prediction in 91. In 91 also, Pope John Paul, probably the most beloved pope of all time, most well-known. He also predicts that by the year 2000, the world would have a one-world government. How he could have predicted that, I am not sure. I do find it interesting. There is a passage somewhere in Revelation that talks about it. You know what? I'm gonna screw it up. Basically, if you read between the lines, it's as if there's going to be some big-time religious figure reincarnated. They're talking about how John's you know what? Just YouTube that one yourself. I'm getting too far off topic here. I will say this. The casket of Pope John Paul is under a 24/7 camera. Are you aware of that, by the way? I wouldn't be surprised if someday someone opens up that casket and climbs out and looks just like Pope John Paul. And believe me, if that were to happen, even my mother would trust whatever that guy said, even if it really were the false prophet or the Antichrist or whatever it might be. And all my research, it wouldn't matter to her, and probably close to 1 billion other Catholics, because in their minds, they would be seeing a miracle. But let's understand something, that doing miracles is not what separates heavenly powers from evil ones. They are both capable of miracles. So if that's what your faith relies on, you can easily get tricked. Moving along, 1994, Neil Armstrong gives that cryptic speech at the White House. It's one of the only public appearances he ever made. The same way Admiral Byrd looked sheepish, those Apollo 11 astronauts, I mean, when they should have been, prouder than anything that had ever been done by humanity. It looked like their dog had just been run over by a car. He gives essentially no interviews his whole life. He drops out of the limelight. He was also a 33rd degree Freemason, I think one that perhaps had a conscience. And in 1994 speech at the White House, which would have been, what was that, the 35th anniversary of Apollo, he made the parallel that he was more of a parrot than any other flying bird, and parrots don't fly very well, but they do repeat what they're told. And he also teared up and said, to the next generation of scientists and essentially people, the next generation that's up and coming, to open your eyes. If you could just look behind the veils that protect the truth, as if the truth needed protection. 1996, NASA starts looking for life on Mars. Now, many people will tell you we cannot even get to the moon. And Elon Musk just launched a spaceship that actually was a modern-day miracle because it landed in an upright position using its own rockets after several failed attempts. Yet we somehow successfully landed a ship in that very same manner on the moon several different times with no hiccups. Yet we are having trouble performing that same, old maneuver today. Just another little clue for everybody. 1996 again, there's water found on Europa. 1997, the Phoenix Lights. Oh, I will say, I skipped one that I wanted to mention. 1993, there were thousands of folks in Mexico City that saw basically the equivalent of what was seen in Phoenix, called the Phoenix Lights, and that's a bunch of lights in the sky. Military had no idea what was happening or who it was. There was essentially a lockdown on information. But it's easy to, when something is witnessed by thousands of people and video recorded by, at that time, perhaps just dozens. Today, it would be thousands because everyone's got a camera.
It would be millions.
Millions.
It would be millions within minutes. As many people that are on Facebook or Twitter or whatever that would share that thing. Oh, my God.
And I think that's perhaps why there are over 60 or so million documented appearances, views, things captured on camera that are considered to be, quote-unquote UFOs, unidentified flying objects that are not from our military, and they're not birds, and they're not weather balloons. And one of the only ways to keep this secret here in the final moments of this fourth quarter is to just to throw out the name calling. It's to start throwing out, you're going to believe conspiracy theorists, then you're crazy for even looking into it. And sadly, there are a lot of people that actually they're going to believe the makeup wearing guy on the news that tells them what to think, not how to think. Big, big difference. So the Mexico City sighting was 1993. Again, all of these, look them up. Use your own eyes. What does your heart tell you? Don't believe me. You got to get your own answers to these things.
That's one of the
meaningless.
things I like about you, man, is you're telling people your opinion, and they can believe you if they want, or they can not believe you. It doesn't really matter to you. But you're trying to educate these people, let them know, and telling them, if you don't believe me, I don't want you to believe me. I want you to go do the research. Get educated for yourself, because any Tom, Dick, or Harry, you're saying it right now, can say something and you'll believe them if it's on Facebook or if it's on the internet or if it's on TV. But these guys are getting paid to say this shit. You're not getting paid. You're paying to do this stuff. And you're telling these people, please go do the research so we can have an educated conversation.
You got to use your own eyes. See, there's something that happens. I could come here and tell you a story that, oh my God, I just drove by this horrific accident on the highway.
Yeah.
And you're nodding your face, and yeah, that's how we all would react to a verbal story like that. But let's say I pulled out a video of the same accident, and in it, you saw a car roll over, you saw a body fly out, you saw it got run over by a truck, right. And the thing is visual. All of a sudden, the same story has your jaw on the ground. It just became a lot more real to you. And it's along those lines. This will not touch your heart in a meaningful way unless you look for it yourself. And that's why I don't want you to believe me. So prove me wrong. And if you can, call me, because that means, guess what? I'm cracking open some beers and maybe hitting the town tonight for some old-time fun, because I'm completely off in the wrong direction. I wish I could say that with truth in my heart, but I can't. So I continue on. Phoenix Lights, 1997. Now, more and more people are starting to own video cameras, and this was something that was filmed by hundreds, witnessed by thousands. Now, this happened on March 13th in 1997, and we're talking thousands of credible people. There are many, for instance, there are some famous, they're famous now for being UFO researchers, but they had a regular life as doctors and as plumbers and as just regular people living their life, and they see this thing and they drop what they're doing because they know what they saw. The governor of Arizona himself. Now, he got some heat because he came out the next day mocking this, these lights in the sky, which he himself saw. He sort of made a joke about it, and people were pissed off at him because they thought that he was kind of making light of this heavy subject. And he would come out in later years apologizing about that and also saying, I feel horrible because I did see these lights, and it was not anything that it was nothing that our military has, or that it could have been anything that we've ever been taught. Now, what's interesting is March 13th was when the Phoenix lights happened. Now, local media stations from all over, literally the world, descended on Phoenix. And day after day after day after day, the story was not covered in the national mainstream media until finally, on June 18th, all our media, in an obviously coordinated fashion, June 18th, 1997, USA Today, ABC, CBS, NBC, they all come out on the same day talking about the story in a way that kind of shoves it under the carpet, asking some questions about it, obviously having to acknowledge that there was something there because their lack of acknowledgement was starting to become the story in and of itself. There was a ridiculous-looking triangle ship painted on the cover of USA Today, and that was their explanation for what they saw, which was, it's an advanced military aircraft that the government's working on. Don't worry about it. It's for your protection. That should give you a little clue to how truly coordinated our media is. The same media that announced the impossible collapse of Building 7 before it even happened. 1996. I'm a little bit out of order here. Astronaut Edgar Mitchell, he goes on Dateline NBC, and he comes out and says, I'm quoting him here, he says, NASA is covering up what really happened at Roswell, New Mexico. Another little hint I'm not going to get into now. Look up Gus Grissom. Your daddies might know who he was if you don't know his name. He was one of the, I guess he was more involved in the Mercury program, but he was an astronaut. And he was starting to come out and say some things that the powers that be didn't like, along the lines of essentially this whole thing's a hoax. We can't.
He was one of the characters portrayed in The Right Stuff, right?
Yes, he was in The Right Stuff, and he was actually killed when his capsule caught fire, and the other two astronauts in there also were killed.
It was Apollo. No, it wasn't an Apollo.
Had to be pre-Apollo 11 or late. It could have been Gemini or Mercury. If you look that up, maybe we can look him up. And his own family to this day will state vehemently that he was murdered, and this was no accident. Gordon Cooper, another astronaut, said the same thing. And, I've already pointed out, the names Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. These are all the occultic gods from the Babylonian times. These guys have been around forever. Moving on through history, 1989.
It was Apollo 1.
Apollo 1. Okay.
Grissom was killed along with fellow astronauts Ed White and Roger Chaffee during a pre-launch test for the Apollo 1 mission at Cape Canaveral.
Yeah. Why don't you guys look up exactly how many explosives were that were kept in the module? That's what blew up and caught fire, not the actual fuel. Anyhow, 1989. Did we ever do that Challenger mission?
We talked about it a little bit on when you were on Next Up.
Did you ever see the photograph of the crew?
Oh, yeah.
What's your personal opinion? Do you think those were modern-day photographs of those guys?
A few of the ones, they were modern-day photographs of some of the people. The ones that really got me were like the pilots, the older
Dick Scobie.
Yeah, Scobie.
I'm sorry, but
that's him.
That's him.
That's him.
I'm sorry,
no doubt about it.
Him.
The black dude, not so much, because the one guy's got a gap between his teeth. The other dude didn't. The Hawaiian guy or Japanese guy, he looks dead on, but supposedly it's just his twin brother. The one lady, not McCullough, but the other lady, that's her. 100% positive that's her.
For me, it was the Scobie and
the two guys.
The two guys, I'm just like, I'm sorry.
The two white guys are dead ringers.
That's all we need. You only need to actually believe one of them, and all of a sudden, I mean, this has got to be. It was outside my belief system. But it was things like that. And right now, if you guys are wondering what I'm talking about, just look up Challenger Space Shuttle hoax. Again, there's enough researchers out there. And the lies are so brazen that it does not surprise me anymore that they did, in fact, fake their deaths. Yes, something did blow up, without a doubt. I just don't think there were 6 I think it was an unmanned ship or some
Maybe
unfortunate fellows we'll never know who were actually on. It doesn't matter, but it's kind of a sad state when the rulers of our world assume that we are literally, and they're right, we're so dumb we won't look into it for ourselves. We won't even believe it, so they can do whatever they want.
And that was 1986?
Yeah.
So you're talking, 14 years before the internet was even something that was imaginable for the normal person, the regular person. You know what I mean? So there was the video, and that's it. That's all we got.
Yep.
There might have been a few hundred people there watching the thing because remember it was Kristen McAuliffe, the first teacher in space, the first non-astronaut in space. And there was probably maybe some amateur video and maybe some snapshots taken or whatever. But the only video that exists that I've ever saw to this day is the one from Cape Canaveral. It's the only one ever.
Right. And all that video shows is something exploding in the sky. We have no idea if there were people on it or not. We know what the story was, but I can also tell you this: the same people that told us that story already, they
Dead
are
and gone.
Well, the organization that sold the story, NASA, has without a doubt lied about many, many things. And you certainly are aware of the fact that, I've uncovered the lies our government told about 9/11. And moving on through history, again, a little bit out of order. 1989, George Blaha. Now, this is a guy that was on 5 space shuttle missions. March 24th of 89, and this was picked up by ham radio operators all over the world, because there's 2 frequencies NASA talks on. One is the quote-unquote public frequency, where they used veiled words and never talk about anything controversial. Then there's NASA's private frequencies, which they have just plain as day conversations, and that can only be picked up by ham radio. And this was picked up all over the world. And he said, his quote was, "Houston, this is Discovery. We still have the alien spacecraft under observation." 1999, we already know about the 20 astronomers that were killed in the French Alps cable car accident. My point is this. We have, 2 minutes left?
Yeah, well, 1.
1 minute.
We can go 2.
Someone else I want you guys to look up is a guy named Phil Schneider, Schhneider. It's one of those people that I would call a hero of our country. He used to work for the Department of Defense. He was part of the program that was building underground tunnels under a lot of these bases, where do your own research on what people claim is held down there. If you ask me, the quote-unquote, the invading armies that humanity is going to be facing are gearing up below ground. And as they were digging into one of these tunnels, they broke through the ceiling of another tunnel below it. And he immediately, along with 4 other guys that were on his little gondola, got into a shootout with gray aliens. Not the small ones, but the 9-footers.
Right.
This guy swore to it to his day. Now, here's another guy that died a mysterious death, but he did get his testimony out. Anyhow, a lot to chew on this week. We'll try and do something lighter next week. If you care about your future, I'd look into these things. Until then, I'm going to say God bless everybody. Thanks for listening in, and we'll be back next week with Down the Rabbit Hole.